Human, you activated my nesting instinct. Now you're not allowed to leave.
The moment I regained consciousness, I knew I was screwed. Smoke curled in lazy tendrils through the shattered cockpit, the acrid scent of burning circuits and melted metal filling my lungs. My ears rang from the crash, my body aching from the violent impact. Through the cracked viewport, I could barely make out the alien jungle beyond. Massive, twisted trees with bioluminescent veins stretching toward a sky the color of deep amethyst. Thick, humid air pressed against my skin, making every breath feel heavier than it should. I groaned, unbuckling myself from the restraints with shaking hands. The emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the ruined controls. My ship, my beautiful, state-of-the-art survey vessel, was nothing more than a pile of scorched wreckage. The comms were dead, the thrusters were shot, and judging by the way the hull had crumpled on impact, I wasn't flying out of here anytime soon. I was stranded. All right, Ethan. Don't panic. I muttered to myself, running a quick systems check. You've survived worse. That was a lie. I had never survived worse. The emergency beacon was intact, but I had no idea if it was actually transmitting. Even if it was, who knew if anyone was listening? The nearest human outpost was light years away, and this planet, Zeldar Prime, was officially classified as highly inhospitable, which was science speak for, if the atmosphere doesn't kill you, something else will. A deep, guttural growl echoed from the jungle. Fantastic. I grabbed my sidearm, a compact plasma pistol with exactly 4 shots left, and climbed out of the wreckage. The moment my boots hit the ground, I felt it. The planet was alive. The ground beneath me pulsed faintly, almost like a slow heartbeat. Strange, spindly plants curled toward my warmth, their tendrils quivering as I stepped past them. The air was thick with the hum of unseen creatures, an alien symphony that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. I needed to move, find shelter, maybe even food if I was lucky. I took exactly 3 steps before the jungle exploded around me. A massive, reptilian predator burst from the undergrowth, its 6 muscular limbs propelling it forward with terrifying speed. It was at least 12 feet tall, covered in obsidian black scales that shimmered with an unnatural sheen. Its eyes, burning amber slits, locked onto me with the kind of hunger that turned my blood to ice. Oh! Oh shit. I barely had time to react before it lunged. I fired. The plasma bolt seared through the air, hitting the beast square in the chest, only for the energy to dissipate across its scales like water on stone. It didn't even flinch. Well, that's just cheating, I breathed. The thing let out a piercing screech, its jaws opening wide to reveal rows upon rows of serrated fangs. I stumbled back, heart hammering, every instinct screaming at me to run. Too late. It pounced. And then, a shadow moved faster than my eyes could track. 1 second, the monster was midair, its claws inches from my throat. The next, a curved blade sliced through the darkness, severing muscle and bone in one fluid motion. The beast hit the ground with a deafening thud, its body spasming, blood pooling into the soil. I barely had time to process what happened before she landed in front of me. And that's when I saw her. Tall, lithe, deadly. She moved with the kind of effortless grace that made even the most elite human soldiers look clumsy. Her armor, midnight black with streaks of bioluminescent violet, clung to her body like a second skin, shifting subtly with each movement. A long, sinuous tail flicked behind her, the sharp tip glinting in the dim light. Then there were her eyes, golden, piercing, assessing me with the sharpness of a predator deciding if I was prey. She cocked her head, expression unreadable. "Pathetic little thing," she murmured, her voice a rich, velvety purr. "You would have died without me." I was still catching my breath when she moved. Before I could react, she grabbed me, effortlessly slinging me over her shoulder like I weighed nothing. "Hey, what the hell? Put me down." She ignored me, her tone utterly final. "No." A pause. Then, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, she added, "You are mine now." "What? No, seriously, what?" I kicked, I struggled. I might have even cussed it out loud, but none of it made the slightest bit of difference. The alien woman carrying me, Kazira, as I'd later learn, moved through the jungle with an effortless stride, completely unbothered by the human flailing over her shoulder. "Put me down," I demanded, twisting against her hold. A soft huff. Amusement. "No." God, her voice was infuriating, smooth, rich, and dripping with the kind of certainty that told me she never asked for things. She took them. "You can't just kidnap me." I snapped. "Kidnap?" Kazira repeated, sounding genuinely confused. "I saved you. You belong to me now." I froze. "I what?" She didn't elaborate. Instead, she kept moving, her clawed fingers gripping me with firm but careful strength. As much as I hated to admit it, she was warm, not in the way humans were, but in a way that seeped through my clothes, like the heat of sun-warmed stone after a long summer day. And despite my best efforts, exhaustion crept in. My body ached from the crash, my head throbbed, and honestly, being carried by an alien warrior princess was not the weirdest thing to happen to me today. So, for now, I let it happen. After what felt like miles of dense jungle, we arrived at what I could only describe as a living fortress. It wasn't built so much as grown. A sprawling structure nestled into the mountainside, its walls pulsing faintly, like the whole place was breathing. Strange, bioluminescent vines curled along the entrance, retreating when Kazara passed through. Inside, the air was different, warmer, thicker, filled with an almost tangible energy that prickled against my skin. She finally set me down, and I immediately stumbled back, putting distance between us. "Okay." I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "Let's just start over. I'm Ethan. Human. Lost explorer. I appreciate the rescue. I really do, but I need to figure out how to get back to my ship and—" "You will not return to your ship." The way she said it, calm, absolute, sent a chill down my spine. I frowned. "Excuse me?" Kazira tilted her head, studying me like I was some strange, fragile creature. Which, to be fair, I probably was compared to her. "You are weak," she mused. "Small. Defenseless. You would not survive alone." "I did just fine before you showed up." She arched a brow. "Did you?" "Okay, fine." She had a point. I was about 5 seconds away from being an alien chew toy when she intervened. But that didn't mean I was about to roll over and accept whatever the hell this was. "Look," I said, exhaling sharply. "You saved me. That's great. Thank you. But now I need to." Something warm and heavy settled around my shoulders. I froze. Kazira had draped a thick, fur-lined cloak over me, adjusting it with the kind of deliberate care that sent alarm bells ringing in my head. The furs smelled faintly of her, an earthy, electric scent that made my pulse do weird things. Ah! I blinked up at her. She stepped back, nodding in satisfaction. "Better." "What? Why?" I gestured wildly at the cloak. "What is this?" "A nest offering." Her tail flicked behind her, golden eyes gleaming. "You accepted it. Now you are mine." I nearly choked. "I what?" Kazira gave me the kind of look one might give a particularly slow child. "You accepted my care, my food, my protection. You have activated my nesting instinct." There was that word again. Nest. Nesting. What the hell did it even mean? I forced out a laugh. "Okay, great joke. Very funny. But I don't belong to anyone, least of all an alien warrior with—" I gestured vaguely at her everything, dominance issues. Kazara's lips curled in something dangerously close to a smirk. "A little human. You have no idea." I crossed my arms, trying very hard to ignore the way my skin prickled under her gaze. "And what happens if I refuse?" She hummed thoughtfully, then said, "You may leave if you wish." I blinked. "Wait, really?" A slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Of course." Relief flooded me. Finally, a reasonable answer. I turned toward the entrance. "After death, of course," she added lightly. I stopped mid-step. "What?" Kazura stretched, rolling her shoulders. "A nestmate cannot be abandoned. If one leaves, the bond fractures. It is painful, unnatural." She shrugged. So I will ensure you live a very, very long time, little human. My stomach dropped. That is your definition of you may leave? Yes, she said, completely unbothered. I gaped at her. That's insane. She tilted her head, considering. Perhaps, but it is the way of my kind. Oh, oh no. I was in so much trouble. I sat there, fur-lined cloak still draped over my shoulders, trying to process the absolute insanity of what I'd just heard. Kazira watched me, with the relaxed patience of a cat observing a particularly dumb mouse. So, just to be clear, I said slowly, rubbing my temples, because I ate your food and let you tuck me in. God help me, I let her tuck me in. I've somehow triggered your species' version of a lifelong, unbreakable commitment? Correct. I let out a slow, measured breath, willing myself to stay calm. That's ridiculous. Kazira arched a brow. It is biology. Biology, I repeated, like a hormonal response? She hummed in consideration. More than that, it is instinct. Once a Zalari nests with another, the bond is permanent. I will protect you, keep you close, provide for you. She paused then, with complete sincerity, added, claim you. My brain short-circuited. I shot to my feet, nearly tripping over the cloak she'd so graciously wrapped me in. Nope, 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 nope. We're not doing this. I'm not some lost hatchling that needs protection. I am a fully grown human being, and I am leaving. I turned toward the entrance, making it exactly 2 steps before something coiled around my waist. Warm, unrelenting. I looked down. Her tail. I barely had time to register what was happening before she pulled. And suddenly, I was spun off balance, stumbling right back in her waiting arms. She caught me effortlessly, holding me in place like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart was pounding. I looked up. Big mistake. Kazira was close. Too close. The kind of close that sent every one of my fight or flight instincts into total shutdown because I had no idea which option was safer. A slow, lazy smile curved her lips. You were saying? I swallowed. This is not okay. She tilted her head. Your sense says otherwise. I sputtered. Excuse me? Her golden eyes gleamed with something both deeply amused and dangerously certain. You are flustered, little human. I can hear your heartbeat. Feel the heat in your skin. You are responding. I shoved at her. I am responding with rage. She didn't budge. At all. Embarrassingly out of breath. I gave up and scowled at her. Is this some kind of dominance thing? You get a kick out of overpowering weaker species? Kazira hummed thoughtfully. Oh no, but it is endearing how hard you try. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to take a step back. This time, she let me. Fine, I said, rubbing my face. Let's say I've activated this nesting instinct. Surely, there's a way to reverse it, right? Kazira's expression remained maddeningly neutral. Why would you wish to? Because I didn't sign up for this. A soft, almost indulgent sigh. Humans complicate things. Nesting is simple. We find a suitable companion, and the bond forms. It is permanent. It is good. She studied me for a long moment. You are stubborn, but you will come to understand. I let out a laugh that was probably veering toward hysterical. Oh, yes. I crossed my arms. And if I don't? Kazira's smirk returned. Then I will simply be very, very patient. I groaned, dragging my hands down my face. This was a nightmare. A beautiful, terrifying, alien warrior had imprinted on me like some kind of possessive space raptor, and there was apparently no way out. Unless, my eyes flicked to my broken ship. If I could just get the emergency beacon working, I could call for help. Maybe even get a rescue team out here before things got even weirder. All right, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Let's just take things one step at a time. I need to check on my ship, see if I can salvage anything useful. Kazira regarded me with an unreadable expression before finally stepping aside. Very well, she said smoothly. Go. I didn't trust how easily she agreed, but I wasn't about to question it. Not yet. I turned, taking cautious steps toward the wreckage, fully aware of the weight of her gaze on me. One problem at a time, Ethan. One problem at a time. The first time I tried to escape, I didn't even make it past the tree line. I waited until Kazira was asleep, or at least, I thought she was asleep. Her kind didn't seem to need as much rest as humans, but she'd been still long enough that I figured this was my chance. Carefully, silently, I slipped out of the nest. The cloak she'd given me was warm against the night air, but I refused to let myself get comfortable with it. Every step away from that den was a step toward freedom. I could feel the jungle watching me. The alien trees pulsed faintly, bioluminescent veins running through their twisted trunks. Strange, unseen creatures whispered and clicked in the darkness, their sounds reverberating through the humid air. I forced myself to stay calm, one foot in front of the other. Just as I passed the first line of massive, ancient roots, a shadow moved. My breath caught. I turned, heart hammering, and found her standing there, arms crossed, tail flicking lazily behind her. Kazira had that same infuriatingly smug look on her face, like she'd known exactly what I was planning before I even tried. "You are very bad at sneaking," she observed. I scowled. "You were asleep." She made a soft, amused sound. "I was resting. That is different." "Unbelievable," I muttered under my breath. She stepped closer, effortlessly closing the distance between us. "Tell me, little human," she purred, golden eyes gleaming. "Where were you planning to go?" I swallowed hard, refusing to let the way she loomed over me make me nervous. "Away," I said stubbornly. "I have a ship to fix." "You have wreckage," she corrected. "It will not save you." "You don't know that." Kazira hummed, clearly entertained by my defiance. Then in one smooth motion, she lifted me off the ground. I yelped. One moment, I was standing there like an independent, self-sufficient adult. The next, I was thrown over her shoulder like a wayward pet. "Hey, put me down." She didn't even acknowledge my flailing. "You are mine, little human," she said casually, carrying me back toward the den like I weighed nothing. "Running is pointless." I groaned, giving up and letting my arms dangle. "This is degrading." Kazara just laughed, a deep, please sound that made something in my chest tighten. Damn it. The second time, I tried logic. "I can't just stay here forever," I argued, arms crossed as I stood before her. "Humans have their own customs, our own ways of living. You can't expect me to throw all that away just because you imprinted on me or whatever." Kazira, to her credit, actually listened. She tilted her head, considering my words, and for a brief, foolish moment, I thought I was actually making progress. Then she smiled slow, knowing, predatory. "You are mistaken," she said simply. "I do not expect." "I know." I frowned. "Know what?" "That you will stay." I threw my hands in the air. "And why the hell would I do that?" Kazira stepped closer, and I suddenly felt very small. "Because you are warm," she said, voice dipping into something almost indulgent. "Soft. Mine." I bristled. "That is not an argument." She hummed, reaching out, and before I could react, she flicked my ear. I gasped. "Did you just—" "You make amusing noises," she mused. I scowled, smacking her hand away. "Oh my God. You're impossible." Kazira looked entirely too pleased with herself. "You will understand in time." I groaned, dragging my hands down my face. This was going nowhere. The third time, I actually thought I had a chance. I had spent days carefully salvaging what I could from my shipwreck under Kazira's ever-watchful gaze. My plan? Simple. Get the emergency transmitter working, send out a distress signal, and wait for rescue. I spent hours fixing the device, using whatever scraps and power sources I could scavenge. Finally, I got it to boot up. A weak signal, but a signal nonetheless. I held my breath as the system pulsed. If I could just— A clawed hand suddenly reached past me. Before I could even react, Kazira wrapped her fingers around the device and crushed it. I watched in horror as the transmitter crumpled in her grip, the delicate wiring sparking uselessly before going dark. My stomach dropped. I turned to face her, shock bleeding into fury. "Are you kidding me?" Kazira met my glare, utterly unrepentant. "You were distressed." "Yes, because I was trying to call for help." She tilted her head, as if the concept itself was foreign to her. You have no need for it. You are safe. That is not the point. Kazara exhaled, stepping forward. Instinctively, I stepped back, but she caught my wrist before I could retreat. Enough, she said, and this time, her voice carried something dangerous. You fight me at every turn. You deny what has already been decided. I gritted my teeth, heat rising in my chest. Because I didn't ask for this. Kazira's gaze darkened. For the first time since meeting her, she looked genuinely frustrated. You did not need to ask, she murmured, voice low. I chose you. The words sent an unexpected shiver through me. Kazira must have sensed it because her grip on my wrist tightened, not painfully but firmly. You think this is something to escape, she continued, golden eyes locking onto mine. But what you fail to understand, little human, is that I would never let you go. I swallowed hard, every nerve ending suddenly very aware of how close she was. You. My voice wavered slightly. You don't get to decide that. Kazara studied me for a long moment, then smirked. Not cruel, not mocking, but something far more dangerous. We will see. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that this was far from over. The problem with being held captive by a gorgeous, impossibly strong alien warrior was that eventually, you started to forget you were supposed to be resisting. At first, I fought against everything. I snapped at her when she hovered too close. I scowled when she draped me in warm furs and refused to let me sleep anywhere but in the soft, insulated heart of her den. I glared every time she handed me food like I was some fragile, dependent creature. But despite all my efforts, Kazira never got angry. Annoyed? Sure. Amused? Constantly. But never truly angry. That should have made me feel victorious. Instead, it made me feel like I was pushing against a mountain, one that had all the time in the world to wait for me to stop being stubborn. And worse, she was patient. Infuriatingly patient. She didn't try to cage me. Didn't restrain me. Didn't grow violent when I disobeyed her. She just watched, like she knew something I didn't, like she knew exactly how this was going to end. And maybe that's why I started slipping, because at some point, I stopped noticing how often she stood between me and the jungle's dangers. I stopped resenting the way her arm would brush against mine when she handed me food, or how the scent of her warm, electric, undeniably hers, had started to feel like home. I stopped realizing I was losing, until one night, when everything finally snapped. It started like any other night. I was sitting by the fire in the den, absently running my fingers over the soft fur Kazira had once forced on me. At some point, I had stopped pretending I didn't like it. Across from me, Kazira sharpened one of her wickedly curved blades, her golden eyes flicking toward me every now and then. She did that a lot, watching me, tracking my movements even when I wasn't doing anything remotely interesting. I knew why. She was waiting for me to admit what she already knew, that I was hers. And I hated that a part of me was starting to wonder if that was really such a bad thing. The realization made something in me snap. I couldn't do this. I couldn't let myself give in. So I did the only thing I could think of. I picked a fight. You don't own me, I said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Kazira's blade paused mid-motion. Her eyes lifted slow, assessing. No, no, I said firmly, standing up. I'm not your nestmate. I never agreed to this. You just decided I was yours. Without my input. Kazira exhaled through her nose, setting her blade aside. You accepted my care. My food. My protection. I scowled. I didn't know that meant signing my life away. She rose to her feet, slow, deliberate, like a predator deciding whether or not to pounce. Does it frighten you? I took a step back. That's not the point. Her gaze darkened. It is exactly the point. Before I could react, she moved fast. One moment, she was standing across from me. The next, she was in front of me, and I was suddenly backed against the wall of the den. My breath caught. She wasn't touching me. Not yet. But she was close. Close enough that I could feel the heat of her body. Close enough that the soft, bioluminescent markings on her skin pulsed in time with her slow, measured breaths. You claim you do not belong to me, she murmured. Yet you are what I give you. my fingers clenched in the fur-lined cloak still draped around my shoulders. "You take what I offer," she continued, voice dipping lower. "You let me keep you warm. Let me keep you safe." My pulse spiked. "You could have fought harder," she said, almost teasing now. "But you didn't. Why?" I opened my mouth, to argue, to deny, to say anything, but the words didn't come. Because she was right. I had stopped fighting. At some point, resisting had become habit rather than necessity. A desperate attempt to convince myself that I wasn't already halfway lost. Kazira tilted her head, watching me wrestle with myself. Then, after a long moment, she lifted her hand, slowly, deliberately, and brushed her fingers against the side of my neck. A barely there touch. A test. I shivered. Her pupils dilated. "You feel it, don't you?" she murmured. I swallowed hard. It was dangerous how much I did. Because standing there, caught in her gaze, wrapped in the warmth of her presence, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to leave. Not anymore. Kazira must have seen it in my expression, because her lips curved into a knowing, victorious smile. "You are mine," she whispered, so soft it almost wasn't a sound. And for the first time, I didn't argue. I never expected to feel safe in her presence. Not when she was this. Towering strength wrapped in a body built for war, a warrior whose very instincts were forged in battle, a predator who had chosen me as hers. And yet, when I sat beside her by the fire, when her golden eyes flicked toward me with undeniable possessiveness, I no longer felt the urge to run. Because somewhere along the way, I had stopped wanting to escape. That should have scared me. It didn't. It happened fast. The attack came in the dead of night, shattering the quiet hum of the jungle. One moment, I was drifting somewhere between wakefulness and sleep, wrapped in the warm nest Kazira had built for us. The next, a snarl. A new snarl. One that wasn't hers. Kazira moved before I fully registered what was happening. 1 second, she was curled around me, her body an anchor of warmth. The next, she was gone, already on her feet, her claws unsheathing with a deadly, metallic hum. I sat up, pulse hammering. Something loomed at the entrance of the den. Not something. Someone. Another Zalari. Bigger than Kazira, but not by much. Deep, dark blue scales instead of crimson, his golden eyes glowing with challenge as he stared at her. A flicker of movement behind him, others, 3, maybe 4, staying just out of reach, watching. I barely had time to register the way Kazira's entire body shifted, her muscles coiling, her stance widening, her tail lashing in a sharp, dangerous arc. She was furious. The intruder's gaze flicked to me. His nostrils flared. And then he smiled. "You would challenge me," he rumbled. "Over this?" I stiffened. Oh. Oh shit. I wasn't an idiot. I had learned enough about Zalari instincts to understand exactly what was happening. This wasn't just an intrusion. This was a claim challenge. Kazira didn't move, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Then, slowly, she exhaled. The sound was lethal. "You think you can take what is mine?" she murmured. The male Zalari's grin widened. "If it is weak enough to be taken, then it was never yours to keep." A heartbeat of silence. Then, Kazira lunged. The impact was instantaneous, brutal, violent, a collision of bodies that shook the ground, sending debris scattering. I barely had time to react before they were tearing into each other, claws flashing, tails whipping like blades. It wasn't just a fight. It was a war in miniature. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't. I was frozen, watching as Kazira unleashed hell. She moved with a precision that was almost terrifying. Every strike calculated, every dodge effortless. But the male was strong, too. He fought like someone used to winning. Blood spattered the den walls. Not hers. Not yet. Kazira's tail snapped forward, fast as a whip, catching the male across the face hard. He snarled, stumbling, and then she was on him. Her claws sank deep into his shoulder. Her fangs, God, I had never seen her use her fangs, tore into his throat. A wet, sickening sound. The fight was over before he hit the ground. The others who had come with him, his allies, his pack, vanished. Gone into the jungle without so much as a backward glance. Kazira stood over the body, heaving, her chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. And then, slowly, she turned to face me. I swallowed hard. She was still in battle mode. Still too raw, too wired, too feral. I should have been scared. I wasn't. She stepped toward me, slow, deliberate, like she was trying to decide what to do with me. Then, suddenly, she was in front of me, gripping my chin between her fingers, tilting my head up. I didn't move, didn't dare breathe. Her golden eyes burned into mine. He thought he could take you, she murmured. Her voice was low, rough, possessive. He thought you were weak. I opened my mouth, but no words came. Her grip tightened, not painfully, but enough to make something hot coil low in my stomach. Say it, she whispered. Say that you are mine. My heart was pounding. I wasn't sure when my resistance had turned to something else. Something darker. Something inevitable. I swallowed. And then finally I said it. I'm yours. Kazira's pupils dilated. She let out a slow, satisfied exhale, a victory, a claim, a promise. And then, before I could even think about what I had just done, she kissed me. The moment Kazira's lips met mine, the world tilted. Heat surged between us, something primal and undeniable. Not soft, not hesitant, but acclaiming, a force as inevitable as the pull of gravity. Her grip on my chin tightened, not allowing me to retreat. As if I even wanted to. I didn't. I couldn't. Because the second she touched me, I was lost. Her mouth was firm, demanding, devouring. She kissed like she fought, fierce, dominant, utterly sure of herself. Like she had been waiting for this. Like she had known all along that I would give in. And maybe she was right. Maybe she had always known I would crumble the moment I let myself on her back. Her tail curled around my waist, anchoring me against her as she deepened the kiss. A soft, please growl rumbled in her chest, sending a shudder through my entire body. My hands, traitorous, desperate, grasped at her armor, pulling her closer instead of pushing her away. She noticed. She felt it, and that was all it took. Suddenly, I was pinned, my back hitting the soft, fur-lined nest before I even realized she had moved. Kazira loomed over me, golden eyes blazing, her breathing just a fraction heavier than before. You are mine, she murmured, as if I still needed convincing. I wasn't sure I did. Her fingers traced my jaw, slow and deliberate, before dragging down my throat. Not threatening, just feeling, mapping me out like I belonged to her. Which, God help me, I did. Something inside me snapped. I surged upward, grabbing her, dragging her back down to me. She let out a low, satisfied purr as our mouths met again, sharper this time, needier. I had been fighting her for so long. Now all I wanted was to let her win. I woke up wrapped in warmth. Not just the nest, not just the furs. Her. Kazira's body curled around mine, her tail lazily draped over my waist. Her arms were caging me in, holding me as if she had no intention of letting me go. I should have felt trapped. Instead, I felt safe, whole, like I had been meant to be here all along. I turned slightly, watching her. Even in sleep, she was beautiful, sharp and strong, all lethal grace wrapped around something far softer than she would ever admit. She must have felt my gaze because without opening her eyes, she murmured, "Awake already?" Her voice was sleep-rough, warm, utterly unguarded. My throat went dry. "Yeah," Kazira hummed, shifting so she could tuck me closer. "You are not leaving," she murmured, completely sure of herself. I hesitated, but only for a moment. Then, finally, I let myself relax into her warmth. "I know," I admitted softly. A slow, satisfied smirk curled her lips. And this time, I didn't fight it. The first time I saw my wrecked ship after fully accepting my fate, I expected to feel regret. But as I stood at the edge of the clearing, staring at the twisted, overgrown remains of my former escape plan, all I felt was peace. The jungle had already started reclaiming it. Vines curled through the broken metal, glowing fungi pulsed softly along the shattered hull, and strange, delicate creatures skittered across the surface like they had always belonged there. This place, the wild, the unknown, the alien, had become my home, and I wasn't alone. Behind me, Kazira shifted, watching me with quiet amusement. She had barely let me out of her sight since I had given in, since I had whispered the words she had waited so patiently to hear. "I'm yours." I had meant them, and I still did. Her tail coiled lazily around my waist, a reminder, a silent claim. "You have been staring at this wreckage for some time," she observed. "Are you regretting staying?" I turned to look at her, really look at her, at the golden eyes that had once been so terrifying, now achingly familiar, at the fierce, untouchable warrior who had carved her way into my life with relentless patience and an unshakable belief that I belonged to her. I reached up, brushing my fingers against the back of her hand. Her skin was warmer than I remembered. Or maybe I had just stopped fearing the heat. "No," I said honestly. "I'm not." Something in her shifted. Something subtle, something deep. She exhaled slowly, then curled her arm around me, pulling me effortlessly against her chest. I felt the slow, steady rhythm of her breathing, the unshakable certainty in her embrace. "I told you," she murmured, voice edged with deep satisfaction. "You were always mine." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're insufferable," Kazura hummed, brushing her lips against my temple. "And yet, you love me for it." The words sent a shiver down my spine, not because they were wrong, but because they were right. I didn't say it, not yet, but the way I leaned into her, the way I let myself be held, was answer enough. Word had spread. A human had willingly accepted a nestmate bond. Not just accepted it, embraced it. I could see it in the way the other Zalari watched me when Kazira and I walked through the jungle villages, their sharp eyes flicking toward me with curiosity, fascination, and in some cases, respect. A human, bonded to a warrior of their kind? It was unheard of, and yet here I was. Kazira, of course, was entirely smug about the whole thing. I could feel it in the way she curled herself around me at night, in the way she ran her claws through my hair like I was something precious. She had won, and God help me, I was starting to think I had too, because I had come here as an explorer, searching for the unknown, and I had found her, my home, my nest, Mukazura, and I wasn't going anywhere.